This is the story of how I became a ghost in my own life. My name is Sia, and until 2 years ago, I was just a normal 22-year-old living in Cape Town, working a decent job at a marketing firm, sharing a sunny flat with my best friend, and thinking I had my whole future mapped out. But then, the ground opened up, and I fell right through. It started with a man named Lucas. Lucas wasn't just anyone. He was my boss, the charismatic, silver-tongued director of the firm. At first, he was a mentor, always praising my work, taking me for coffee, telling me I had a real future there. But slowly, subtly, the praise turned into something else. His compliments became too personal, his touches lingered too long, and his expectations shifted. He started asking me to stay late, just him and me, under the guise of important projects. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach, but I ignored it. I needed the job, and I didn't want to rock the boat. How naive was I? Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and everyone else had left. Lucas said we needed to finalize a presentation for a major client on Monday. We were alone on the 23rd floor, the city lights twinkling below us. He poured us both a glass of wine, saying we deserved it after a hard week. I should have left. I should have screamed. But I didn't. What happened next was a blur of force, fear, and violation. Lucas, the man I trusted, the man who held my career in his hands, raped me. Afterwards, he didn't even look at me. He just straightened his tie, told me to clean myself up, and said, "You understand this never happened, right? For your sake and for the sake of your career here." He walked out, leaving me shattered on the cold office floor. The days that followed were a living hell. I went to work, I smiled, I did my job, but inside I was screaming. The shame was suffocating. I felt dirty, broken, and utterly alone. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Lucas was a powerful man with a spotless reputation. He was a pillar of the community, a philanthropist. I was just a junior employee. I knew if I spoke up, he would destroy me. He would say it was consensual, that I was after a promotion, that I was lying. The doubt in people's eyes, the whispers, the professional blacklisting, it was a fate worse than death for me. So, I did the only thing I thought I could do. I disappeared. I quit my job with a flimsy excuse about moving back home. I packed a single suitcase, left the rest of my life behind, and vanished. I moved to a small coastal town, changed my name, and took a job as a waitress in a diner. I cut my hair short, wore baggy clothes, and tried to erase every trace of the person I used to be. I became a ghost, haunting my own existence. For months, I lived in a fog of fear and self-loathing. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every touch. I watched the news obsessively, terrified Lucas would somehow find me, that he would ruin the fragile new life I'd built. But he didn't. He had no idea where I'd gone, and he probably didn't care. To him, I was just a forgotten conquest, a stain on his otherwise pristine record. Then, one rainy afternoon, while cleaning out a storage closet at the diner, I found an old box of newspapers. Buried beneath the yellowed pages was a local Cape Town paper from the week after I left. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The headline screamed across the front page, "Prominent businessman found dead in apparent suicide." My breath caught in my throat. The article detailed how Lucas had been found in his office, the same office where he'd destroyed me, with a single gunshot wound to the head. A note was found on his desk, confessing to a life of lies and saying he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. They said he'd been embezzling funds from the company for years, and the pressure had finally gotten to him. I stood there, the dusty air thick in my lungs, and a cold, hard truth settled over me. Lucas hadn't killed himself because of guilt over what he did to me. He'd killed himself because he was a coward who couldn't face the consequences of his financial crimes. His death wasn't a punishment, it was an escape. He'd gotten away with it. He'd raped me, destroyed my life, and then simply checked out, leaving me to carry the weight of his sins alone. That's when the ghost inside me changed. The fear didn't vanish, but it was eclipsed by something else, something darker and more potent: rage, pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't get to be the victim. He didn't get to die a remorseful man. He was a monster, and the world needed to know the truth. Not for me, not for any kind of justice I could receive, but because letting him be remembered as a flawed but ultimately good man was the final, unforgivable insult. So I stopped hiding. I didn't go to the police. They couldn't touch a dead man, and it would only drag my name through the mud. My revenge was far more subtle, far more permanent. I started writing. I wrote an anonymous blog, pouring every detail of that night onto the page. I described his voice, his mannerisms, the exact layout of the office. I didn't name him directly, but I gave enough clues, enough specific details, that anyone who knew him would recognize the truth. I called the blog Case File Echo Crimes That Haunt. I posted it online and watched. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the comments started coming in. A former employee shared a story about how Lucas had made her feel uncomfortable. A client mentioned a suspicious transaction. A journalist, intrigued by the cryptic clues, started digging into Lucas's past. The blog went viral. The narrative of the grieving, guilt-ridden philanthropist began to crack. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs turned into a roar. I watched from a distance as his family's carefully constructed image crumbled. His wife, who had always smiled beside him at charity galas, was forced to address the allegations. His company, once a symbol of success, was investigated for the embezzlement. The foundation he'd built was tarnished, its donations questioned. My final act was the most satisfying. I sent a copy of my blog post to every major news outlet in South Africa, along with a simple note: "The truth is often buried with the dead, but some crimes echo forever." The story exploded. Lucas's suicide was no longer a tragic end to a troubled life. It was the final act of a predator trying to outrun his own darkness. His name, once spoken with respect, was now synonymous with deceit and violence. His legacy wasn't one of charity and success, but of hidden depravity and the lives he'd shattered. I still work at the diner. I still live a quiet life, but I'm no longer a ghost. I'm a survivor. And Lucas is the one who's haunted. Every time someone reads about his crimes, every time his name is mentioned with disgust, every time a victim comes forward because my story gave them courage, he is punished all over again. He thought he could erase me, but in the end, I erased the lie of who he was. And that, more than any prison sentence or public shaming, is the sweetest revenge of all. The ghost I became didn't fade away. It became a weapon, and it ensured that the monster's name would forever be a whisper of shame.